Niin.
Kaikki turhat tauot ja muut jää pois.
Kiva, joo.
Joo.
Siis tämä on kuitenkin, mä oon säveltänyt tämän kappaleen 8 vuotta sitten, niin, niin kuin jotenkin ei nyt ihan kaikki ole ihan selkeästi mielessä.
Ei.
Mutta joo, koitetaan.
Mä menen tästä pois.
Okei.
Oota hei, mä laitan laturin vielä tuohon, että se ei vaan...
Joo. Laitetaan laturi vielä koneeseen, ettei se tilttaa.
Okei. Joo.
Yes.
Siis mä pidän silmälasit päällä sen takia, että mä näen ton tekstin. Niin
Samoin.
Näin.
Samoin. Onneksi on tekniikka. Okei, aloitetaan.
Okay.
I'm very happy to open our symposium and give a warm welcome to Mrs. Kaija Saariaho, who will take part in the symposium via discussion, which will be recorded now on Friday 5th. Maan varjot, Earth Shadows, is a composition for solo organ and orchestra by Kaija Saariaho. The work was jointly commissioned by the Montreal Symphony Orchestra, the Orchestre National de Lyon, the South Bank Center, and the Philharmonia Orchestra. It was first performed in Montreal on May 29, 2014, by the organist Oliver Latry and the Montreal Symphony Orchestra under the conductor Kent Nakano. Maan varjot has a duration of approximately 15 minutes and is composed in 3 movements. Kaija, could you tell us about the title of the piece and the text behind it?
Yes, this title comes from a poem, very long poem by Shelley. It's dedicated to John Keats, who passed away, and that it's a kind of elegy on the death of Keats. So the title comes from this poem, and I wanted to use the title in Finnish because when I started working on this piece, it brought me back to my youth, to my time before I became a full-time composer student, and because organ was my main instrument then. And somehow it seemed natural to give a Finnish title when I, after long years, came back to this instrument, to which I had not written anything larger earlier. And I dedicated then this piece in memory of Henri Dutilleux, a composer whom I have had so much admiration and who passed away when I was composing this piece.
Very, very fascinating. And I feel when I read the text that I can hear the text in the music. And could you tell how has the text affected the music actually?
This is always really interesting question, because in fact, when I started to look for a title, I had already music in my mind, and this music had a specific atmosphere. And in a way, I was looking for a title that would make this me feel stronger, this atmosphere, and keep this atmosphere, which often is the first thing that I imagine when I start composing new music. So I found this poem by Shelley, and I felt that there was a correspondence. And then in this poem, there are some really beautiful images. And these images then corresponded some musical ideas that I had also already in my mind. So some of these images then I took to use the titles for the 3 movements that I have in the piece. So for example, the first movement is it has a kind of quick, swiftly moving character, and so I just took a title from the poem called Shadows Fly. The second movement is slower, and it's a kind of symmetrical movement. My tension is raising and then again descending, and so I call it the dome, something that is also found in the poem. And the final movement, it's kind of restless, energetic, even a little bit overflowing. And there was a line in the poem which says flowers, ruins, statues, and I don't know, kind of list of things that don't belong together, but which have this energy of flow. So there are these kind of interrelations. But then on the other hand, like often in my music, these connections, they remain abstract. It's not that I would take a title, flowers, runes, statues, and then try to describe it in my music. That's not how it happens. It's rather that these titles, they hint maybe to the character of each movement.
Haluatko pitää taukoa?
Tuliko tässä nyt tarpeeksi tätä asiaa?
Tämä oli erittäin hyvä.
Joo.
Mittava.
No otetaan pikku kuulaus.
Joo. Mä yritin kirjoitella, kun mä rupesin tekemään tätä kässäriä, niin että mä puhuisin osan sun sanottavasta. Että tavallaan niin kuin jo valmistelisin, että sä voisit mennä paremmin sinne asian ytimeen sitten.
Joo, no en mä tiedä, onko mulla niin paljon sit lopulta sanomista. Ja nyt tämä sit, mitä mä ehdotin, että pannaan yhteen, niin katsotaan, miten mä siitä pärjään. Mutta kun kaikki liittyy kaikkeen,
Niinpä.
niin se on ehkä parempi sillä lailla.
Joo. Tai jotain vähän ehkä mietin, että onko hölmöä kysyä liian simppeliä, mutta sitten taas ihminen, joka ei tiedä näistä asioista mitään, niin on kauhean kiinnostunut sinusta tai tässä teoksessa tai uruista, niin ne voi olla kauhean merkityksellisiä asioita sitten vaan niin kuin sanoo ulos.
Niin onkin, ja sitä paitsi eri ihmiset kiinnittää eri asioihin huomiota.
Niinpä.
Onko tämä niin kuin ihan yleisölle?
Tämä on kaikille, mutta varmaan etupäässä säveltäjille ja niille, jotka ottaa osaa tähän kilpailuun. Että mä markkinoidaan sitä niille ja tämä jää sitten olemaan.
Okei. Joo. Okei, no koitetaan tämä toinen. Tämä on nyt niin kuin pisi.
The organ and the orchestra can both be considered as similarly rich and powerful instruments. When you composed the piece, what kind of roles did you intend to give to the organ and the orchestra, if we consider, for example, timbre? And as you have said, unlike some other instruments, the organ doesn't need to fight to rise above the orchestra. So you say that they are not competing in decibels. Finally, when I'm thinking about this piece, it's not a long piece, less than 20 minutes. And the organ part is still closing and challenging, but it doesn't appear to be in form of a concerto. What was the idea behind this form?
Yes, well, first about this thing about volume. Yes, well, we have orchestra, which is such a loud instrument, if we can be such a loud instrument, and organ also. And we know that organ can, unlike any other instrument, can raise above the orchestra. So that's not even a challenge. But I didn't want to imagine this kind of dramatic duel of decibels. And I don't even consider this piece really like a concerto. Even if the global form in 3, it could direct our thoughts to more traditional concerto form. But what I imagined here was like these both instruments are so rich, and I wanted to make them exist side by side, and in 3 different kind of situations. And the 3 movements have very different characters, and but they form a totality, of course. But there is not this fight aspect. There is kind of a more equalitarian way of advancing and developing the material together. As such, of course, orchestra and organ, they do have common factors. Both have very large range. There are many different possibilities to meet on the level of timbre. For example, but I was not so interested on these common characters. What I had in my mind, it was that I wanted to find those factors that separate these 2 instruments and give their very own particular identity. And if we think about this way, orchestra and organ, well, we can see those things that separate them. Orchestra can be, of course, very detailed. The orchestra score notated in details. You have 80 musicians. You can write different dynamics to everybody, different playing techniques, and all that. Orchestra can be very flexible because it's a group of many human people, persons, and so it can be colored very much in detail. And as a contrast to this, I wanted to see organ as a more graphic instrument. And it could be like imagined sometimes in this piece, like it would be a picture that can be colored differently. Because finally, every organ is different. And every time when my piece is played somewhere, it will be a little bit different. It sounds a little bit different in every hall. Every organist makes different kind of registrations. So this kind of graphic character, I found it really interesting. And then, well, that's one thing, that the main contour is really important for the organ part. And then if we think about the textures, I mean, of course, orchestra and organ, they both can produce very rich polyphonic textures. But then what is interesting and different with organ is that these textures can be extremely precise because there's only one performer. And you can do certain kind of textures that you cannot do with this group of 60, 80 persons for that reason. And then one thing that I really love with organ is, of course, that you can have these long sustained notes, and nobody needs to breathe or nobody needs to change the bow. And this, of course, is very contrasting what comes to orchestral instruments, because there we don't have instruments where a note can be held like the same way. So in this idea of sustained notes or chords, here again the graphic character, I think, can be highlighted a lot. So this kind of pairs of contrasts, that was a little bit my starting point. And then you asked about the duration. Well, this is in fact completely practical thing that, as you said, the piece was premiered in Montreal, and it was played when the new organ was opened. And that was a huge festival. And they played enormously music. And they played music from all periods and all styles. And they had also several world premieres. And they just asked that the piece would not be too long because they had so much music to perform. Pikkupaussi.
Joo, loistava vastaus.
Eihän siitä nyt oikein unohtu niin paljon mitään.
Hirveän hyvin rakensit. Vastasi tosi musta täyttävästi.
No hyvä.
Nythän ei ole niin pitkiä. Mä puhun enemmän ja sulla on varmaan yes, no vastaus.
Joo, no mä vähän puhun, kyllä mä vielä puhun vähän näistä rekistereistä.
Hyvä.
Joo, jatketaan vaan.
If I compare the organ and the orchestra has a greater flexibility, which comes from the ability to create microtonality, glissandos, rich textures with instrumental noises or delicate multi-layered dynamics. The organ, on the other hand, has the ability to produce rich and very precise textures controlled by only one musician, as well as long sustained notes, as you already said. However, here and there I can hear microtonal and other rich textures which are produced by innovative registrations on the organ. I would like to know how much did the first performer, Olivier Lafrique, have a hand in these registrations, and how much did you influence them?
Well, of course, before I started even these compositions, I heard Olivier playing quite often. I had a chance to climb to the organ balcony in Notre Dame when it still existed, and sit there while he was playing in the messes and improvising and doing all kind of crazy things, I think. And this was, of course, really inspiring. During the composition then, I had some ideas concerning the registers in my mind, but they were not detailed. But so I wrote them to the score, like the first movement. I just made a note. The organ motif should have different colors from one to another. Okay. The second, I wrote a general note saying this movement should start and end very intimately. It can grow into more confident and sonorous registers. The polyphonic voices should have clearly different colors. And the third movement, I just wrote changing bright colors, prominent reeds and cornets. And then, well, this was the starting point for starting to try out things. Olivier made many propositions. And during the rehearsals, then we tried out different combinations. I think he, well, like all organists, I'm sure, used so much time to try out different combinations, and especially with these new organs, where it was like a new domain to find all these combinations. So he was finally the one who proposed me things, and then we changed them, modified them. Then we played the piece in several venues, and every time, of course, the registers were a little bit different. So in the end, when we had made this first tour, Olivier made propositions in the score. And I'm happy that there are some propositions, but I don't expect that everybody is following his propositions. I think it's really a part of the personality of every musician to propose their own registers. So, but I think it's good that they are there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel myself that they are very good and important basis for the whole job. Actually, in this piece, even it is not so long, there are very many things which need to be solved before the first rehearsal with orchestra. And I found it takes 4 or 5 hours at least to make the registrations, because there are so many balance things and different colors that it takes time to invent everything, and it's very good that there is some kind of basis.
Yeah, starting point.
Yeah, it's very good, and it's not only just a starting point, it's also good instruction to follow.
Yes, yes. It's. I think that's quite the interesting thing to mention, that people don't think about how much work it is, because there are so many coloristic possibilities in organ. So you need to define them. So you don't often think when you go to listen some organ concert that the musician has worked for hours and hours to find exactly these colors for that concert.
Miltäs tuntuu?
Jatketaan vaan.
Miten susta haluatko?
Ei, se on oikein hyvä. I also very much like your way of using glissandi and broken clusters on the organ. You already said that you love the sustained notes on the organ. Even though they are not a very common way to play the organ, I mean these glissandi and broken clusters, they work really well and give the texture new features. How much did you need to study how this could be played on the organ during the composition process?
I didn't study that. I mean, normally all things which are a little bit like extended techniques, I imagine. And then when the piece is ready, then if needed, I experiment with the player. And this I do, when I compose, I do it very physically. I mean, I imagine the instrument very physically. When I compose for cello, I really imagine the hands of the musician. And in this case, because I played organ myself, I just imagined this glissandi, and then we tried out with Olivier, and I think Olivier was not so very fond of them. So it was more about convincing him to do it. He wanted to do it very quickly, like as if it would not really happen. I don't know. It was a new gesture for him. But I like them a lot, and I think it works well also. Yes.
In first movement, you have in rapid places many very fast glissandi, And I found that I really need to make fingers to them and decide that on which hand I can play the glissando. And you have asked to play also the exact note as an upper note.
Yeah.
In the top of glissando. So I have to sometimes play the glissando first, like with right hand, and then the last note with left hand, and then go on the rhythmical notated part with right hand again. It's everything is possible, and I can see that you have decided that on which hand need to be played things. It's very comfortable, but it needs some preparations.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. I don't even know if is that top note always necessary. Yeah. But I mean, it depends on the relation of the orchestra, because there are always these meeting points between orchestra and the organ. Yeah.
Well, in your music, I have had a feeling that I rather really learn to play the right notes than to just improvise some glissando, because then I can focus also to the glissando itself, that it's really long enough or short enough and rapid enough.
Right.
So it gives also the contrast to the texture. That
Right.
like
Yeah.
all glissandos will not sound too similar, but different.
That's true. They should not be similar.
Yeah.
Yes, they have different characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also in third movement, when you have these big clusters combined to glissandos, I always need to think that should I really use my whole hand with them, or all fingers, or just one finger to make glissando. It's they are sometimes very fast, and more effective thing is to play with the whole hand then, and then go on with the notated music. But I think this is like a salt to the performer.
Yeah, but
Thing.
do you think I left too much freedom there to decide?
Absolutely not.
No.
No,
Okay.
no, I don't feel so. I
Okay.
really feel that there are so many hints to take
Okay.
ideas that I just need to investigate how to make out all your ideas and features.
Yeah, because there is a fine line to I always want to leave in my music space for the performer, because every person is different and their personality is different, and I think it makes much more interesting to perform the music if you feel that it becomes a little bit your music too. But
Yeah.
then, yeah.
Well, we have already earlier discussed a little bit, which we need to follow later, about the rubato in your music and about tempos, especially very fast and very slow tempos. As in the second movement, tempo could be very slow, and in the first and last movement, the tempo could be quite fast.
Yeah.
But then the rubato, because you ask performer to use rubato also, but where to use it, because in very fast places, it's not possible to play rubato, otherwise I go away from the orchestra part.
That's true. Maybe rather in the slow motion. But then it depends very much of the breathing with the conductor, of course.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's I think it's mark of very good music that we can think about these things and we are not ready at all at any time, but we are processing these questions. It's really interesting for performance.
Mm. Good.
Haluatko sä pitää taukoa? Meillä on pari juttua jäljellä.
Ei kun jatketaan nyt, tämä menee ihan ok.
Kiva. When you combine a flexible orchestra and a static organ, there's always a challenging to find similarities between the two opposing instruments. An orchestra can play almost anything, but the organ is always bound to exact keys, tones, and pipes. How much have you tried to find the same flexibility in the organ part as the orchestra usually has? And were you surprised by anything when you first heard it performed? Something which you didn't expect when you were composing the piece?
I didn't, as I said earlier, I didn't. I was not looking for same thing with the orchestra and the organist, and I kind of accepted organ also with its limitations, if you want. I wanted to use those things that were strong and different with organ, and I didn't look for things that were not there. So I didn't feel that kind of difficulty at all, in fact. About hearing, expectation, something you were... Not really. Just realize that how extremely loud organ can be. Just that the orchestra tutti sound can be really erased by organ. So to find the balances, really the good balances, that's not easy. That's quite difficult, really.
Did you find anything during the process of composing Man Varjot that you would like to include and develop in further works for the organ if you were to compose them?
Well, I think this was my first big piece. I learned a lot. And I didn't ask myself, okay, where to from now, except that for sure I at some point need to write a solo piece now. And there my take to organ will be different because I don't have this situation with orchestra. So I think there I then go much more in detail what comes to flexibility and what comes to even more refined colors and think about the hands on different keyboards and all that. That's a work that I have started in this concerto, like in the second movement, all the time the 3 layers of melodies. So here I know that I can develop that and yes, find maybe that flexibility and all what you mentioned much more in detail than in that kind of context.
There will be new technology in the new organ in the music center in Helsinki. What kind of timbre and texture are you interested in getting from the organ? Did you already say it about that when you talked about these different layers?
Little bit, yes, of course. That well, now because we know that we will have also a possibility to microtonality. That's unbelievable. that makes it so rich instrument that there are so many ways to use microtonality. So it will open the palette of this instrument. And what is interesting in microtonality is also that you need to know how to use it. It's very demanding. I mean, it's not just a color. It's something that has it changes our way of hearing. So I think that will be a very vast field, I'm sure, with this instrument, that people are looking for different kind of audibly interesting and new and fresh ways of using it and combining it with all the register possibilities we have. So I think there will be much inspirational work with that instrument to come.
I'm sure of that. And the International Kaija&Jan organ composition competition is currently underway. There are 3 different series and many possibilities to take part in the competition. What sort of advice would you give to composers who are writing music for the new Rieger organ in Helsinki and similar modern organs like it?
Well, I think it's always good idea when you write for an instrument that you don't know so well yet is to study the history of that instrument. Study all the masterpieces that have been written for organ, all the classical fantastic music that there is from different periods for different kinds of organs, to understand how organs in different historical periods have been so different, and then start studying our new organ, which will be, again, we spoke again already of some of these new possibilities. So just to understand the richness of the instrument, and then as you compose, we always, to create the identity to music, we need to define our material and we need to define our means. We cannot take the whole world. So I think after having had this study period, for example, in historical works, when you listen organ, what are the things that strike you as a composer yourself, and what could you keep from that in your own music? And then try to find your own personal view to this new instrument. So that is what interests us, is to, what do you have to say and how do you say it, and how do you hear in your mind this instrument? So that's so exciting.
These are very good greetings to the composers all over the world.
Yes.
There is still plenty of time to take part in the competition because deadline for scores is in the end of October in next year. I'm very happy for this discussion and thank you for your time and many valuable ideas.
Thank you, Jan. Bye bye.
Bye. Kiitos.
Tuliko siinä nyt tarpeeksi?
Erittäin hyvä, joo. Me ollaan nyt 40 minuuttia puhuttu, että sitten varmasti saadaan hyvin se puoli tuntia. Onko sä tyytyväinen?
No en mä osaa ruveta, siis kun mä en oikein osaa ruveta korjaamaan. Jos siellä on jotain semmoista, jäikö joku semmoinen, joka oli ihan sekavaa tai...
Ei, missään tapauksessa. Mikään ei ollut sekavaa. Kaikki oli erittäin kirkasta ja selkeitä ja tuli tosi monipuolisesti mun mielestäni esille asioita. Että varmasti niin kuin eri tasolla olevat ihmiset on, niin kuin, saa niin kuin paljon tästä irti.
No hyvä. Onko Kaisalla jotain huomioita?
Ei, mä itse asiassa olin tuolla aika kaukana,
Joo,
enkä kuunnellut koko aikaa. Ajattelin, että saatte ihan rauhassa.
joo, hyvä. Joo.
Mä oon
Okei.
tässä valossa.
Niin.
Niin sä oot ihan, siellä on näköjään, mä huomaan, siellä on nyt ollut, onko ollut jo pari päivää tuommoista?
On. Tää on ihanaa. Nyt alkaa tulla tää kevään
Joo.
valo. Siis alkaa jo, siis 7:30 aamulla on jo niinku valosaa. Niin se on ihan
Vau. Joo,
Joo.
se on aina se helmikuun ihanuus sit kyllä.
Niin.
On.
Joo.
Hyvä, hei, kiitos
Jep.
sinulle. Voimia, jaksamista ja ollaan yhteydessä ja